All right, next, we're actually going to get into a cool new segment we've started. We're going to be doing different segments at each of our events. So it may not be this segment every single time, but one of them is, it's called the Angular Report. And basically, it's just going to be news and updates about Angular, what's going on with Angular. Are there any new features that we'd like to talk about? So I'm going to turn the time over. We have Jason and Preston from our co-organizing team, and then Stephen Cooper from AG Grid is here to join them, and they're just going to go over some news and features that we want to talk about and just discuss with Angular 15. So I'll turn the time over to you three.
Perfect. All right, thanks, Brooke. So yeah, we'll kind of keep this sort of brief so we can get to our next speaker as well. But we talked over the last couple of weeks with Angular v15 coming out, and just wanted to share a few things that we thought were kind of highlights from the release. And so one of those that we wanted to talk about, and I'll scroll down in this article, which is from the Angular team. It's their yeah, they wrote like a release article for v15, and I just posted it in the chat. But we'll kind of use this, we'll show it here while we're talking about it, but I'll turn the time over to the other two to talk just a little bit about our first one, which kind of jumped out to us, and that was error messages. Okay, so Jason and I we talked about this earlier today, in fact, but it was way down here. Okay, yeah. So one of the things that they highlighted was the fact that we haven't had very good stack traces when errors happen in our applications, and so they've worked with the Chrome DevTools team to improve those. So you can kind of see here in his article, this is what you might see in previous versions of Angular. If you had an error, you'd have this stack trace, and you can see on the first line that it tells you that it happened in the component on line 18, but then all these other lines are just like a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't write that code and you didn't have anything to do with it, and so it doesn't really help you to see all of that information. But in the second example here, this is what they are working towards, and it's a little bit smaller in this case, this error, but it also has a little bit more information. Tells you that it happened on line 18 still in that component, but it also down here says that it was an app component, the click listener, in the HTML file on line 4. So it does help a little bit more to be able to show you where it happened in the code. So my question to you other two is why do you think, or how do you see this benefiting us in Angular 15 going forward?
This is just another example of Angular looking at and listening to our developers, because you just think about the time this will save across the board, across everyone who's developing Angular. And I think they're going to make it even better than this. Like that last line, app component click listener, I think there's plans as well for that to then reflect the template string that you've actually used where the click listener is. So you can just visually see this straight away, fix your error and carry on without losing your flow so much. So I think this is just, a great productivity win across the board and make people love using Angular even more. And it's really nice to see the love Angular is getting, and it's really growing. And I think it's these kind of changes where developers are really being, I guess, treated and given these really nice features, which is just going to make Angular stronger and stronger.
I agree with that. When I first upgraded my first project to Angular 15, I actually broke it on purpose because I was so excited about this. I wanted to see the error message. right? So yeah, the error messages are a big deal. Yeah.
But then I think it's not just about the error messages as well. I think when you're debugging your code as well, it's going to do a better job at staying in your application code. So you're not going to end up stepping into code which, you know, isn't really your responsibility to step through. So again, it's these developer experience improvements are, you know, really very valuable.
Absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with all that. I'm excited for improvements, and like you said, Stephen, that this is just like the first step, and it's kind of exciting to see where it's going to go from here. Okay, so the next part is about probably something that many of you, if you've been following the upgrade, you've heard about this, but standalone components. They were introduced as a developer preview in version 14, but in version 15 they became stable.
Wait, what? They're a fad, right?
Yeah, maybe. No, but for the two of you, what do you think this really brings, briefly, because we could, you know, this could be an entire talk on its own, but what do you think that this brings to the Angular community and Angular applications to be able to have standalone components and pipes and directives and stuff like that?
I think for me, I'd say there's clearly the simple onboarding and getting started with Angular and opening Angular up to that, I guess, new users in an easier way. For me, I think there's still value in ng modules and how you can set some things up. So I don't think they're gonna completely disappear. But I do like the idea of being very specific about what you need in a component. So like instead of just having ngIf or, you know, ng model magically work because someone else has imported the form modules, you know, in a different part of your application, I can see that using standalone components where then someone has, you know, explicitly imported the form module or even just what you're using. I think that takes a lot of the mental load away, and straight away you think, oh yeah, I'm missing that. And then even if the Angular language service isn't then going to highlight these things in our editors saying, oh, you're missing this. Again, I think it's really simplifying Angular. So I think a lot of these changes are really great for, I don't know, making Angular easier to reason about and not have, I guess, what some people might consider hidden magic with ng modules. But then I think there's still a place for ng modules when you know how to use them and how to develop features that require that. Because I think you don't want to end up in a situation where your standalone component is you've got a massive import list in every single component. So I think, you know, there's going to be great use cases for them, but then I think there's also cases where ng modules, you know, does do a good job.
I agree with that. I agree with everything you said. The lowering the bar of entry to Angular is a big deal. But one of the unintended side effects or consequences of this, or maybe it was intended, is standalone components allow meta frameworks like Analog to work. So if you talk to Brandon Roberts, you know, the only way that he was able to get Analog to work with like Vite and all the cool stuff that it does is you have to use standalone components along with those meta frameworks. So I think having them be self-contained allows you know, component testing in Cypress to be easier and meta frameworks to happen and things like that.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think I realized that about Analog, that the standalone components is what enabled that. And for me, I heard about these in V14. Lots of people were really excited, and I didn't really get it. Like, but and I still am like kind of at the early side of using them and testing them out. But one of the things that I do like is that it just allows people to use either ng modules or standalone components. They can just use it how they want. And if they have a use case for standalone components, they can use it. But the Angular team hasn't forced us into one way or another. And so you can use what is best for your use case. And if you're comfortable with continuing to use ng modules, then keep using ng modules. But if you want to try out, if you have especially like a small component or a pipe that you want to test it out, those are great to kind of dip your toes in the water with standalone components. So,
and I have to give a shout out here to Chris Thompson, who's here in the chat. He was the one who pushed me into standalone components, because I felt similar to you, Preston, that they're kind of a fad. I'll let it see what happens. And Chris did a big PR for one of the projects I was working on. So thank you, Chris.
All right. The last thing that we wanted to highlight real quick, we're kind of running out of time on our segment, but we wanted to talk real quickly about how with version 15, there were some changes made to the router that made routing a little bit easier to work with. And there's a lot of things that it did. Let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. So this is by no means a complete recap of the changes to the router. But one of the things that I thought was cool is that if we look at this example here, this is using a standalone component as a route. But previously, when you wanted to lazy load a route, you would import the component from the file that wherever it was located, and then you'd have to do .then and import, or you'd get the class, and then you'd have like m.lazy component or whatever. So you had to explicitly tell it what it was loading. But now, as long as you have a default export, and so in this case, export default class lazy component, when you import the route, you can just import the file, and you don't have to do the .then. And I don't have a whole lot more to add to that, other than, like, that's just, it just simplifies it. And you don't have to remember to do the .then, and so those types of simplifications are just like the other ones that we talked about. Those are big for developer effectiveness and efficiency and stuff like that. But there's lots of other changes to the router. A few of them are mentioned here in this article. I don't know if you two have any additions that you want to make to this part about the router.
I think this is another example of where you don't need code. If you can delete it and it works the same and you're not losing meaning, it's great. It's like, similar when we saw, Jordan switch to the self-closing tags. Your template is cleaner, and there's just less noise, so you can focus on the actual important parts of your code logic. So yeah, anything like this, I think, is a good win.
I find myself agreeing with you quite a bit, Stephen. You say a lot of good things. The only thing I would want to add to this that came along with Angular 15 is route level providers are amazing too. And it's another way of moving noise out of your templates or out of your components and into some place where it makes more sense, right? So now you can provide your services at a route level, and then all the children of that route will get the service. It'll be available in the DI injector.
We haven't even touched on host listeners as another way of removing more boilerplate code as well, but maybe we don't have time to cover those.
Cool. All right. Well, I also posted a link in the chat to an episode of the Angular Plus show where Emma Tversky went into like a deep dive on version 15 with the folks over at the Angular Plus show. So if you want to learn more, go ahead and listen to that episode as well. Check out the blog post that the Angular team wrote up about the release, and then also share your favorite parts of the Angular 15 release, and we'll keep doing these types of updates as major versions are announced, or sometimes minor versions if they have some cool stuff. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, all three of you. You're exciting things. I love hearing the updates and just getting some good feedback on all of it. So thank you.